Hey y'all, I'm Cal. Let's get messy. Hi guys, welcome back. There's a very peculiar kind of grief that comes not from what happened, but from what won't happen. The future you planned, the dream you dared to dream, the version of your life that, not so long ago felt inevitable. And then one day it just isn't. It dies. Usually it's a slow and painful death, and oftentimes it takes a really long time for you to notice that it's dying, to accept it and to stop fighting against it. And when it does, or when you do allow it to die, you're left sitting there, holding the weight of something that never came to pass, but still shaped you at the time, and maybe even defined who you were trying to become. And this isn't something that just happens to one particular group of people or one type of person. I think this is something that we've all experienced in our lives at one point or another. I'm sitting here in Georgia today, not for much longer, packing boxes again. And I started thinking, 3 years ago, I packed these same boxes with so much hope and certainty and dreams. David and I were empty nesters, are empty nesters. At the time, I was working in a job that I could do from anywhere. My kids had often talked of moving here to be closer to their cousins. David was ready for a change. We were both coming up on 50, and it was like, this is the time, you know. And at the time, everything we were doing to make this happen just fell into place. His job fell into place. We found a house right. It was all working out. And I had a plan and a dream and a vision and a hope for where we were going and what our life was going to look like forever, right? And I can remember thinking, this feels like a dream. I cannot believe we're actually doing this and it's happening. It's all working out. And, maybe you've said that about your own dream too. Or maybe you're saying it right now. And it wasn't a fantasy. It isn't a fantasy. It's a blueprint, something you're building piece by piece and hour by hour and detail by detail. You put your whole being into it, fueled by a purpose and a hope for something better. You make sacrifices, you do scary things to make this dream a reality. And sometimes you make poor decisions along the way, and sometimes it takes a while to realize that your decisions were poor. But still, even through all of this, I have clung on to such hope that even when the failing results were smacking me in the face, I just kept trying to make it work and make it happen. And, again, it's not just me and us in this situation. It can be anything, a dream job, a perfect guy or girl that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. We all experience it. We all at one time or another have that thing that we build up our hopes and dreams and fantasies as, the end all be all thing. This is it. And still, sadly, sometimes, no matter how hard you try, something just doesn't work, right? There's not always a dramatic ending or a big loud clap of thunder or a final betrayal or a straw that broke the camel's back. It just sometimes is just a slow, quiet death. The excitement fades, the pit in your stomach gets bigger, your body starts feeling it before your mind even catches up with it. You start leaking energy from places you didn't even know you could leak energy from. For me, I started having a lot of panic attacks. That's where it started. Many more than I had in years past. And I've talked about this before. My shoulders kind of lived permanently hunched in my ears, and I stopped sleeping well. And then, a lot of the time stopped sleeping at all. And my nervous system was screaming at me something that my brain didn't want to admit. This isn't sustainable. This isn't healthy. This isn't you. This isn't happening. The dream you had, all of it, the house, the land, the dream job, the kids moving here, the closer ties to your extended family. It's late. It's just not happened. End of story. And it's devastating. Admitting it feels like failure. Because if this big, bold, beautiful dream isn't working, what does that say about my judgment or my resilience or my worth? And eventually, though, you have to face the reality. This isn't happening. Not now, and maybe not ever. And something inside of you just kind of shatters, and it's always been very hard for me to describe this state. I came across a quote last year, Soren Kierkegaard. The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly one you'll never have. And when I read that the first time, the air just caught in my chest because that was exactly it. The feeling I was feeling then and now and countless times before that, but never had such beautiful words to explain it. And what it's saying is, you don't just mourn the loss. You mourn all the years of imagined joy that you pictured in your mind. You know, you mourn all the time and the sweat and the tears that you put into building this dream that all of a sudden feels wasted. The life I thought I'd build here, the job that I thought was going to be one thing and turned out to be another, the version of myself that I thought that this move and this part of my life would unlock, the someday that I thought was finally happening, and then to realize it's just gone. You know, you grieve not only everything you're losing now in the moment, but everything that hasn't happened and won't, but you dreamed it would. And you grieve the confidence that you lose, the trust in your own instincts, and just slowly get beaten away, one crumbling piece of that dream at a time. And the thing is, our nervous system doesn't distinguish between real loss and the death of a possibility, right? The body grieves it all the same. And I think that's why this kind of disappointment can feel so physically overwhelming and so surprisingly deep. This is the kind of grief that is different and harder to explain, but I also think it's harder to empathize with because it's so difficult for people to put into words. And so I just don't think we talk about it. It's not public like death is. It's not visible like divorce is. It doesn't have, funerals and wakes and rituals and casseroles delivered to your door. It's just you sitting alone with a resignation letter that you're scared to send in, or a mortgage payment you can't afford anymore, or a home repair that you at one time thought you could do yourself, realize you can't. And you feel worthless, and you feel like a failure and a loser. And you try to be rational. This isn't a waste. I learned something. And I'm very big on learning, and it's all true. I've learned so many things, not only about what I'm incapable of, but about what I am capable of even more. But it still hurts. It's still embarrassing. It still feels like failure, even when it's not. It's like it leaves this U shaped hole in a future that doesn't exist. And so, when I finally admitted that I couldn't make it work at that job and that staying was harming me more than leaving ever could, and that selling the house and moving back home, it's like this simultaneous feeling of relief and terror, because if this isn't working, if this detailed plan that I put together and worked so hard at isn't working, then what? And so you're in this weird in between spot where you're grieving the you that won't ever be, but also finding the courage and the strength and the dream to build the next version of you and your next big dream. And it's scary and it's exciting and it's terrifying because your psyche is literally trying to reorganize itself around a new reality. And it takes time and it takes energy and it takes a lot of compassion for the parts of you that aren't ready to move forward yet. For months now, I have felt like I was grieving someone who was still alive and the future version of myself that this opportunity was supposed to create. And I've really had to learn to hold on to both truths. This dream mattered deeply to me, and it's not happening the way I imagined, and both things are true. And really, the turning point for me, and I know I'm still getting a little weepy here, but there has been a turning point, and talked about it a week or two or three ago, when I stopped asking why me and what's wrong with me and started asking the real questions that will help me move into that next phase with more confidence and hopefully this time more compassion for myself. What does my body need right now? Because our nervous systems, especially those of us who are neurodivergent and trauma informed and highly sensitive, our bodies know things well before our minds do. And my body has just needed rest and predictability and, around people who saw my humanity over my productivity. I've needed to remind myself that my worth isn't tied to tolerance for toxic environments or my ability to build a bookshelf from scratch, because that's where I placed my worth for a long time. And so, yeah, we're moving back home, and it's not because I failed. It's because I finally listened. I listened to the dream telling me that it wasn't right and it wasn't happening. And I'm still trying to reconcile the grief over the death of this old possibility and the hope for the new possibilities. And it's really providing me with a deeper understanding of how we're all just walking around with nervous systems shaped by experiences we haven't fully processed a lot of the times. Workplace trauma is not unique to me. The dream for this home and this land not working out, that's not unique to me. It happens every day. We just don't talk about it much. We don't talk about what this part of that loss feels like. And, I'm not talking about silver linings or everything happens for a reason and toxic positivity in my change of thinking. What it is I'm still here. You're still here. And when we're still here, that all that means is that possibility isn't dead, right? Only this one is. So the work I'm doing now, supporting people through these transitions using, art therapy and trauma informed approaches, none of that would exist if the original dream hadn't died first, right? And the realization that sometimes what feels like an ending is actually clearing the way for a new beginning is such a liberating feeling. But you still have to grieve fully first, We can't bypass it. We can't dress it up in fake gratitude and rush towards the lesson. Grief has to move through us completely before the new thing has the full room to breathe, right? And what I wish I had known sooner. So I'm sharing this with you now, and I hope you find it valuable. You don't have to figure out what's next right away. Our only job is to tend to what is here and now, to honor what we've lost, to let our nervous systems recalibrate and catch up, to trust that clarity will come when we're ready to see it. And the new dream, the one that's actually aligned with who we're becoming rather than who we thought we should be or wanted to be, it's probably already there. And it's going to wait for us. And we will get there just in time. And so, what I want you to know and what I wanted to share with all of you through this, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not a failure. You're not a failure. None of us are behind schedule. None of us are broken. We're just human and hopefully brave enough to dream in the first place and to continue dreaming because that's where courage is at. The willingness to start over. That takes even more courage than starting the first time. You know, letting go doesn't immediately reveal some new path. Life, sadly, isn't neat. And honestly, though, I think that's part of what makes it beautiful, the unknown. And surviving these difficult times serves a greater purpose of showing us just what we're capable of handling, right? It shows us that we're capable of growth and wisdom and resilience. And the future that we sometimes so meticulously plan doesn't always have to work out exactly to plan to be just as beautiful as we dreamed it would be, and the future doesn't have to be crystal clear. It just has to be yours and mine. I think sometimes the most honest thing we can do is admit that we don't know what comes next, but be courageous enough and willing to find out because I think that willingness is everything. So just wanted to share that with you in case you're feeling alone or like it's just you. It's not. It's not. It's every single one of us. And we just don't talk about this kind of loss and grief as much as we should. And I think it leaves us all feeling lonelier than we have to. So I hope you'll come back over the next few weeks. I should have some great gals on here with me having some fun conversations. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And until then, be well. And I don't have anything else to say. Love you. Bye.